We're going to call this organizational meeting to order, and the first order of business is to all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, and I'll do the roll call. Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Here.
Mr. Snyder?
Here.
Mr. Z?
Here.
Mr. Tartar? Here. Thank you, council. So our first order of business is election of the mayor, and so I will take nominations from the floor for mayor.
Madam Clerk, for mayor, I'm nominating a person who has served the last 6 years with integrity, honor, and distinction in that position. In addition to his thoughtful and respectful approach to helming the mayorship, he ensures that each and every person who has a position or opinion is afforded the opportunity to speak and to be sufficiently understood. It is no small matter that his colleagues feel confident that their opinions will be aired and represented, and Dave Tartar often plays a large role in helping all those he interacts with to achieve consensus and helps to move the process forward. We especially trust Dave to perform the important role of representation involving citizens, businesses, and events. It is something he does well at, and I've noticed he no longer needs to use 3x5 note cards. His interest in supporting abilities in serving our city ranges from the color of street lamp posts to being its face on Wall Street and landing our single largest bond issue at historically low rates. Therefore, for mayor and for a fourth term, I nominate David Tartar for mayor.
Thank you. Do we have any other nominations? If not, I will close the nominations for mayor. And the nominations are closed. And we have one nomination, Dave Tartar for mayor, and I will take a roll call vote. Since we only have one name, we will be voting for Mr. Tartar, yay or nay.
Ms. Heath?
Yes.
I've just got some comments if we're still following the agenda here.
Oh, sure, thank you.
Great. Thank you. So the last few years have been a prosperous time for the City of Falls Church, and while I recognize that the successes we achieve as a community at large are not solely the result of this elected body, I do firmly believe that this council's current dynamic and collective makeup of personalities and expertise have been an important part of our recipe for success. I'm certainly proud to serve with my fellow council members and proud of what we will continue to accomplish as a team. I expect our collaborative approach, respect for differences in opinion, and strong sense of fiduciary responsibility to those who have elected us to lead will remain intact regardless of who carries the title of mayor or vice mayor. The role of mayor and vice mayor, in one sense, a reflection of the trust and faith we have as elected officials and those that we choose to represent and lead us in the past 2 years have shown. Our internally elected leadership on council has proven a steady hand, objective, and thoughtful, and inclusive in their approach to our deliberations, and I feel that we would be well served to continue in our current roles for the next 2 years. And while some would say that the true luster of those that carry the title of mayor and vice mayor shine the brightest due to immensely dedicated and hardworking fellow council members like Phil Duncan, Dan Z., Dave Snyder, and Letty Hardy, who humbly choose not to carry the elevated titles of mayor and vice mayor, these positions deserve our careful consideration as they will serve an integral role in our efforts to bring future prosperity to everyone here in the City of Falls Church. It is with great pleasure that I support the nomination of David Tartar for mayor and in a few moments, Mary Beth Connolly for vice mayor, and thank them for their past and future leadership. You both have my full endorsement.
And are there any further council comments?
Madam Clerk, in keeping with my New Year's resolution to be brief, I just want to thank my colleagues, Mr. Z, Mr. Lichtenhouse, for their comments, and second all that they've said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Having served in the capacity of both mayor and vice mayor, I'm very humbly more than willing to support our two incumbents who have done a really fantastic job for the city by including everyone and moving us forward in so many ways. And I do second the comment that Ross made a minute ago. I think this is an extraordinary council that has done extraordinary things and will do extraordinary things in the future. So it's a real honor and pleasure for me to support for Mayor Dave Tarter and for Vice Mayor Mary Beth Connolly.
Thank you. Any further comments? Are we ready for a vote? Okay, I'm going to call the vote for Dave Tarter for mayor. Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Mr. Tarter. And I will gladly turn the gavel over to the mayor.
All right, thank you very much. And before we move on to the election of the vice mayor, I have a few words I'd like to say briefly if I could. I just want to make a brief statement if you guys want to indulge me. I'm deeply honored by your selection this evening, and I appreciate the trust you've placed in me. Falls Church is a great community that we all love, but our city is not standing still. We're in the midst of great undertakings, significant investments in our children, our city, and our future that'll pay dividends for years to come. The new high school will ensure that generations of students will now have not only the finest teachers and staff, but also a state-of-the-art facility in which to learn. More importantly, it'll ensure that education remains a cornerstone of our community and the crown jewel of the city. The 10 acres of commercial development present a unique opportunity to help pay for the school and provide substantial tax revenue year in and year out for our taxpayers. But more importantly, it'll create a special sense of place and catalyze development in the west end of the city. And our other improvements like traffic calming, storm sewer, pedestrian and bike improvements, and other infrastructure will enhance the quality of life for all of our citizens for years to come. I'm confident this council has the knowledge, dedication, and commitment to get the job done and to do it right. We all bring different backgrounds and experiences to the table, but together our skills complement each other, make an effective team, and I believe bring out the best for the betterment of our city. Vice Mayor Mary Beth Connolly has an intimate knowledge of our schools and understands the needs of teachers, students, and staff. She has deep ties to the community, local businesses, and nonprofits. She brings people together and knows how to get things done. Dave Snyder is a seasoned leader respected throughout the region. He has unparalleled knowledge of transportation issues and has relations with regional leaders that are critical to optimizing the 10-acre site. Dave helped shepherd the Mary Ellen Henderson School renovation to the finish line on time and on budget. Dan Z is a professional architect and understands the complexities of construction and design and large-scale contracting. He's been a tireless advocate for sustainability and is a recognized leader in environmental issues at the state and regional level, with executive roles at VML and at COG. He has raised the bar on environmental issues in the city, culminating in a net zero-ready high school and recent LEED Gold developments. Phil Duncan chairs the council's Economic Development Committee and has been a tireless advocate for smart commercial growth. He's also been a champion for affordable housing and those less fortunate. Phil has his ear close to the ground with over 3 decades of civic engagement and has been involved with nearly every civic group in Falls Church. Letty Hardy is smart, organized, always well-prepared, and is never afraid to ask tough questions. She has much-needed financial services and project management expertise that is of tremendous value with our current endeavors. She's been a strong advocate for progressive values like gun safety, LGBTQ rights, and inclusivity. She's also a problem solver that gets stuff done. Ross Lichtenhouse brings new ideas and new energies to council. He has substantial experience working with the highest quality real estate development. He understands complex real estate finance, taxing districts, and other sophisticated development strategies. His expertise and skills have been and will continue to be invaluable to the success of the 10-acre site and with future development in the city. This is not just a council effort, however. We will continue to work hand in hand with our colleagues on the school board. The new high school and 10-acre project in particular call for unprecedented cooperation. The Planning Commission, EDA, AAB, and the other boards and commissions will also play major roles. Ultimately, this is a community-wide effort, and our citizens have a leading role to play. We have much work to do. I, for one, however, look forward to the challenge. I'm optimistic for the future. I appreciate the opportunity to continue to serve the citizens of Falls Church as mayor. Thank you very much. All right, so we're on to the election of the vice mayor. And I'm going to call for nominations, and I may make one myself if no one's inclined. If I could, if the rules will allow me, I'm going to go ahead and make a nomination. I would like to nominate Mary Beth Conley. It has been a pleasure to work closely with Vice Mayor Conley these past years. Mary Beth has been an indispensable partner. Her collaborative approach to solving problems brings out the best in everyone. As Chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, Mary Beth has led efforts to improve our budget process and to update the city's fiscal policies, which has been invaluable with the financing of the new high school and the city's AAA bond rating. She's an effective communicator who understands that transparency and openness are the foundation of good government and has made community outreach a priority. Always forward-leaning, she led efforts articulating the city's long-range vision for itself with the 2040 vision statement. She's worked tirelessly on efforts to ensure that our community remains welcoming and affordable for citizens of all backgrounds and means through initiatives like senior tax relief and affordable housing. Mary Beth is also a respected leader regionally, serving as chair of the Council of Governments Region Forward Coalition, which plans at the highest level for the long-term growth of the Washington, D.C. area. Mary Beth builds bridges that benefit us all. For these and many other reasons, I'm delighted to nominate Mary Beth Conley for vice mayor. Does anyone else have any comments, or are there any other nominations? Ms. Hardy?
I like Mr. Duncan's resolution to be brief, so I will attempt to do the same. So I wholeheartedly support that nomination. Mary Beth was one of the people who inspired me to run, first time 4 years ago. And I think she's a standing model of what it means to actually serve the community. I think one of our most important jobs is to make sure that all citizens feel heard. And I think Mary Beth does a really great job at making sure that we are really reaching out to everyone in the community and making sure all points of view are represented before we make decisions. So I support the nomination for that reason and many others.
All right, are there other comments? If not, I'm going to call for a vote then. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
Mr. Tartar? Mayor Tartar?
Yes?
Thank you. And that was
Congratulations, Vice
unanimous.
Mayor Conley.
Thank you.
Yes, of course, please.
I'd just like to thank all of you for your confidence in me. Serving on this body has been one of the greatest challenges and honors in my life, and it seems like every day there's something new to learn. And as we go forward, I think the 7 people sitting up here do such a wonderful job of representing all areas of the city. Working with staff, I feel like we have so much to look forward to, and it is my honor to serve as vice mayor. Thanks.
All right. Let's move on to the next item, which is adoption of rules of procedure and electronic participation policy. Mr. Shields or Madam Clerk, do you all have anything to say about this?
No, we generally adopt our rules of procedure as have been adopted before, and then if there are any changes, we can work session them later this month and bring them back to you.
So you basically recommend keeping them as they were, and then if there
Right.
are changes people want to make, coming back later in the month and having further discussion about them?
Correct. If you'd like me to add it to a work session, we can do that, or we can just go with the baseline of what we had. We did quite a lot of work last year on them, so.
Okay.
yeah.
Are there any comments? We need to make a motion on this, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I move to adopt TR 2002.
Second?
Second.
All right. Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, council.
All right, the next item?
And the electronic policy is just a slight change to state law. It actually doesn't affect us at all. I think the city attorney can back me up on that. We're just getting it in line with state law.
All right. So this is essentially allowing participation by electronic means in this
Yes, and we had
resolution.
already adopted that, and the state had allowed 2 of those electronic participations per year, or 25% of your total meetings, whichever was less. And so they took out the portion in the state law that said 25% of your meetings, or whichever is less. So basically, you get 2 meetings per year, which was the case anyway, because we have
A whole lot of meetings.
a whole lot of meetings, yeah.
Okay.
So we just wanted to make sure it was in line with state law.
All right, are
I
there
just had a
any-
question.
Yes, of course.
Do our boards and commissions also have to follow suit and re-adopt this modified?
I have been in touch. I think, Carol, do you want to answer that?
I don't think they'll have to necessarily adopt it immediately. However, as we move forward, I would recommend that they correct this when they have an opportunity. But I think that they're also in the circumstance that 2 meetings is probably less than 25% of their meetings for most of the boards. So I will check with the liaisons and make sure that they all are, will be reflecting the current requirement.
Terrific, thank you.
Are there any other comments, or do we have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, move to adopt TR 20-20.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Madam Clerk?
Ms. Conley?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Ms. Hardy?
Yes.
Mr. Lickenhouse?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Z?
Yes.
And Mayor Tarter?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, council.
All right, let's move on to council member comments. I believe Mr. Snyder has something he'd like to
Sure.
discuss.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Mayor. In a minute, I'd like to recognize our city manager to go over a couple fundamental messages in view of the international developments. So I'll ask that he address that. We are well-connected regionally and nationally, and we have top-flight public servants in all areas, but there is a role for the public in these days, and so I'll ask the city manager to address that. Secondly, I would, in view of the museums closing in Washington, D.C., I would ask City Council to work on a formal invitation to reestablish the museum in the City of Falls Church, if that is at all a possibility. And finally, there are a number of transportation funding and other issues that will come up during the legislative session that I hope we can defend the funding and improve the funding that we get for things like the Route 7 bus rapid transit. So with that, I'll recognize, if I might, the city manager.
Mr. Shields?
Thank you, Councilmember Snyder and members of council. We have had dialogue through the weekend with some on council just on this area of inquiry, and we've been in touch pretty much nonstop with our state, regional, and federal partners who are all taking increased vigilance in the wake of the killing of Iranian General Soleimani by U.S. forces in Iraq last week. The city public safety staff regularly share information with the Joint Terrorism Task Force and other regional, state, and federal fusion centers. Currently, there are no known specific threats in our area. We ask that the public join us in being vigilant and share information with city police by either calling 911 or the non-emergency line of 703-248-5050. If you see something, say something. And that's a slogan. It's easy to remember, but what does that mean? And let me just give a couple of examples that are local, that are City of Falls Church examples of people who have come forward with useful information. For instance, a city business reported a suspicious inquiry into the purchase of explosive materials, which resulted in an apprehension, and it was an out-of-state action, but it is believed that action of bringing that information to city police resulted in the avoidance of a possible tragedy. A second example, a Lyft driver reported to city police a conversation overheard in his car that tipped police off to a possible 4th of July attack in the National Capital Region. An ongoing area of involvement is members of the faith community who will reach out to city police if they see, as an example, a suspicious person casing a place of worship. These are just some practical examples that have happened in the city of Falls Church in recent years that have resulted, I think, in a safer community. So those are things that we need all to be thinking about. The outreach is a two-way street. The city public safety officials have been deeply involved in our community in training and preparedness, obviously with city staff, but with school staff as well, with our library staff, with the faith community, with the business community. And the information comes back through us, through those channels as well, our restaurants and our bars. They all share information with each other, but they also share information with police when there are things that are of concern. And that helps everybody. When it's appropriate, we'll share information with state and federal authorities and the fusion centers because they're keeping an eye out for broader trends and patterns, and information we can provide can help populate their understanding of what might be developing. So we'll continue to do this work, and we're deeply enmeshed, obviously, in our community, but also in the regional, state, and federal public safety community, and we'll continue to do that. I'd also like to take the opportunity to make a couple of personnel announcements. As council is aware, Tom Polera is retiring from the city. We'll have a ceremony for him planned in the coming weeks, and a date will come out on that. But Joe Carter, who is known to everybody in the community just about, he will be promoted to our emergency management coordinator. And he will work with council and with the community to continue this effort of training and planning so that we're a resilient community and we can respond and recover when the worst happens. Joe Carter will make this introduction to council at an upcoming meeting. Henry Lane, who worked as a part-time fire official reporting to Tom Polera, will be promoted to our fire official. So he will handle our fire plan review and our commercial building inspections, where we've made such great progress over Tom Polera's tenure. I also want to note the good news. As council has been aware, we have struggled with vacancies in our police department. We've had some important retirements. Over the holiday period, we have 4 new recruits to the police department. And we will bring them to introduce them to council as well. But I think it just reflects the diversity of our region. Each of these individuals brings great background and resources to the city. Lewis Tyler Ives was raised in Northern Virginia and has a college graduate degree from Indiana University in criminology. Boris Hugo Mirando Burgos was born in Bolivia and moved to the U.S. in the 2000s and is fluent in Spanish and will be a great addition to our police department. Mehdi Sabil was born in Morocco and is fluent in Arabic and French. And so he will bring a great background and experience to the city of Falls Church. And lastly, Minh Thien Vu Nguyen is joining the city police department, and he is fluent in Vietnamese. These will be great additions to our police department, and we're looking forward to, one of them is a lateral move and will not need to go to academy, but 3 of them will be going to the academy at the upcoming session. So that's good news. And one piece of sad news is Bill Abel, our devoted crossing guard and great community artist and plugged into everything, has let us know that he is going to be moving to Greenville, South Carolina, to be with family there. And so that's a big loss for the department and for the community as well. And so those are some updates on the public safety front. But again, we'll bring Joe Carter to introduce him to the council and the community formally in his new role at an upcoming meeting, and we'll do the same with Henry Lane as well. Thank you.
And we can also get Bill to come on in and show our
Yeah,
appreciation.
that's a great idea.
When is he leaving?
I don't have the exact date, but he has let Chief Gavin know that those are his plans.
Okay. Any comments or other questions for Mr. Shields? Sure, Vice Mayor Conley.
Mr. Shields, over the holiday break, we got at least 2 messages from community members who are concerned about the new traffic pattern at East Falls Church Metro. And I know that is it's in Arlington, but it's affecting our citizens who they've gone from 2 lanes to 1 lane, added a bike lane, and it seems like the traffic flow is pretty congested. And I'm just wondering if our staff had an opportunity to reach out to Arlington staff to discuss that or find out if there are any plans for changes there.
Well, it's a temporary situation. The WNOD is closed for repairs along the banks of 4 Mile Run, and so they have rerouted the trail to the section that has been brought to our attention. And they've put barricades out to provide sort of a protected area for the trail users. So we're trying to get more information just on the length of time that this closure is set to occur, and we'll get more information about that and share it with the community. I do, having sort of traveled through it and experienced it, I understand what they're trying to do with the trail, but also you can see how it does take away the free right turn at that intersection and definitely causes a backup. So I don't know that there's an opportunity to change, but it is a temporary situation.
That's great. Thanks. I'll let the people know.
Before the holidays get too far in the rearview mirror, I just wanted to express thanks for those who were involved in the Watch Night celebration again this year. Very successful. Weather was good. Crowd was very robust. And I know a ton of work goes into that effort. Some of it volunteer, some of it city staff who volunteer to make themselves available on what for most families is a holiday time. So thanks to all who were involved in that. Again, over the holidays, there was some communication about parking signs on South Maple and some discussion about installing them on the Lincoln side of South Maple to encourage the parking that's there to be used 2-hour increments so that the businesses there would have on-street parking for their customers. Just let us know how that's coming along. I don't know if you've had a chance to move on it yet, but it'd be nice to try to get that done early in the new year if we could. And I would just like to second Mr. Schneider's motion about the museum. I don't know what elements of the collection might be available for us, but I do think it would be, I think I've mentioned before, appropriate for our city, which has had a lot of folks in its history who've been in the media and certainly in public service and foreign service, upholding America's values. When they look for placemaking ideas for the Gateway Project, one idea that is at the core of the city's identity is working to advance American values. And the story that the museum tells is an important part of that. And so I would encourage us to explore those conversations if we could. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Z.
Well, as all of us on council know, that Deputy City Clerk Veronica has spent a lot of effort getting the 38, maybe it was 138 candidates before the appointments committee to be vetted, interviewed, And it was a lot of work, and no one appreciates how much work it is until they have to do it themselves. And no one wants to do it more than once, but it's a tireless thing that Veronica does day in, day out to ensure that the wheels turn smoothly. And I understand there's an award that the city can give her. It's called the Star Award. Is that what I'm thinking of? Help me out here. So I don't know what it takes to get her one of those, but hereby nominate her for one of those. And if we have to do it in council next week, we'll do it in council next week. But do we? Okay. Guess that's all we have to do. Make it happen.
Ross and Letty for a Star Award. But you guys deserve one because you did a whole lot of work, and I know how much time and effort went into that. And you guys thought about it very carefully and due consideration, everyone, so much appreciated. Anyway, Mr. Lichtenhouse, what you got?
Yep. You got to know Mr. Z and Ms. Hardy very well during those 38 hours of interviews. No better way I could think of spending my time, just so you know, Dan. Lenny, yeah, it was great. A couple comments. First, Bill Abel leaving. Man, that saddened my heart. Great guy, wonderful crossing guard. See him every day, walking my oldest daughter to school, and just an incredible, talented artist. So for those of you listening, haven't had a chance to see the work of Bill Abel. He does some fantastic watercolor paintings. My wife and I actually just bought one of his panoramic paintings for the city 2 weeks ago. And I expect that those paintings will increase in value significantly if he does depart Falls Church. But just an amazing, amazing guy, and great yoga instructor. So catch one of his last classes here in town if you get a chance. Mayor, and get that back fixed up. Yeah. Two other points of Falls Church business. The Jefferson Village Civic Association, I think this may have been covered briefly in the news press, has been going over traffic calming measures on the Fairfax County side of Rosemary, and there was some conversation, as well as some news bulletins that were published recently related to the speed bumps or speed tables that they'll be getting on the Fairfax County side of Rosemary. And one of my neighbors inquired curious as to VDOT is installing those and maintaining those. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but wanted to raise that issue with you, Mr. City Manager, as it relates to our traffic calming measures on that side of the city as well. And I guess the question came up as to whether or not VDOT could install and maintain ours too for free. And I said, I don't think it works like that. But I did want to raise that issue just to let you know that that is happening on the other side of Rosemary and Fairfax County side. Also, a very, say, random point. I was reading an article this past week, I think it was one of our VML magazines, about electrical vehicle charging stations. And I just wanted to raise this point. I'm not sure when our next West End development project update is going to be, but to make a note for us to ask and have a conversation about 40 amp chargers to make sure that the amperage on those can handle a higher volume and capacity of electric vehicles at that site, so we don't have to spend the money to replace. So making that investment up front. So I did want to raise that issue while I was thinking about it. Thanks, that's it.
All right, Ms. Hardy.
So Ross beat me to the traffic calming request, but either when we get to work session and we talk budget amendment, I know that even though this one doesn't cover stormwater and traffic calming, perhaps we can discuss what the latest thinking on this, since I think the last time we talked about it was probably over a month ago. I'd love to know where we are with the approaches that we talked about, and then therefore the funding needs, just an early heads up on where we are. Thank you.
All right. Now it's time to move to our work session, right? And so do you want us to go down to the table? Okay, here we go.
Microphone is live.
Great.
We have 2 name plaques. These are on when, and they don't turn off, so they're live all the time.
No whispering.
That's for sure.
Yes. He told me that. I've been, I think, connected to some, SC?
Sure, okay.
SC, the school.
Do a full presentation.
He wants the shot, Mary Beth.
Closer and talk, just be talking.
One of these things, yeah. Okay.
While we gesture wildly and.
I
Get Phil in the front.
Banneker's closed through fall.
We're done talking. Yeah, we've already talked. We're done talking now.
Friends, Romans, countrymen.
We're talking, okay, we're still talking. I continue to talk to you. My mouth is moving. Yeah, it was this. How's that?
Hey, Wyatt, so Banneker, where the WNOD is rerouting people, it's closed through fall of 2020.
These are all live.
9 months.
Now they're live. Wow. Okay, live, but deafening.
Yeah.
I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm not sitting down until that noise goes away.
There, because otherwise we have dead spots, we've tested them, so we're getting feedback off of the speakers above us, I think.
They just get turned on.
Let's do the speakerphone cha-cha.
a couple appointments that folks want to change on. Does anybody want to change on any appointments they have?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I'm stepping off the appointments committee.
After all that fun we had.
Let's go out with a bang.
Task force.
Thank you for all your support and all the love that I've felt through the years. I have no desire to be the permanent member of the appointments committee. So it's been a lot of fun. It really has, but all things come to an end. Also, in conversation with Mr. Lichtenhouse and his vast interest in things like bison grazing and trout farms, we decided that his interests might fit better under a rubric of the Urban Forestry Commission. And so I'm more than happy to exchange with him for his current position on the AAB if he agrees. And then he can, I guess I'm stepping off that, so, you know, maybe.
Agreed.
There you go.
So noted. Let's switch.
And let's see, was that it? The city stuff, right? On COG, COG has asked me to serve for a second year on the Climate, Energy, and Environmental Policy Committee, so I would like to be reappointed to that. And I guess I might as well stay on Chesapeake Bay because it's related as well. I think that's all we do here. The VML appointments are later?
Yes, those are later in the year.
Okay.
All right, how about you, Phil?
Are we going?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're on, alternate on NVRC as well, are you?
I am?
Yes. NVRC.
Good work.
Alternate.
Ross, you'd expressed some interest in that before. I don't know who or what is interested in.
Want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, specifically the economic development piece that we're putting together, but I assume that comes with the whole kit and caboodle.
I think so.
Let's do it.
You get the whole enchilada, man.
Okay.
Got it, man. Yeah, put me on there as your alternate.
I'm usually there. I'm
You're
there
the alternate.
90% of the time, so if you don't want to come, you won't need to that often, I don't think.
To say it like that, I'll be there. I'll take your alternate position. That's what we're talking about on NVRC. Yep.
I'm loving my new life already.
Phil, is there anything you want to change?
What-
Why don't we just focus on the things you want to change?
Okay. What are we doing about the transportation groups, are those all going to stay the same? Larry, Ross, Dave?
The regional transportation one?
Yeah. Are we talking about that too, or is that?
We can talk about anything we want.
Okay, let's talk about that. Are we all staying where we were? I'm on this PCAC meeting group, which meets sporadically. I mean, you know, it depends on where things are in the budget cycle for that. Lately, it hasn't met much. Are other people going to keep where they are now?
I haven't done any of those Northern Virginia boards. I'm happy to take a spot if someone wants to drop it, but. if
I'm
we're
only an
happy to
alternate, so I
leave
think
it
I've
on.
only gone once.
Yeah, I'm an MVTC alternate. I maybe have gone twice. Dave's usually
You just do
there.
such a good job.
Okay, well, maybe we just don't need to make any changes then, unless Mary Beth wants to do the PCAC. Okay. The other questions I had were sort of more, Mr. Z and I talked about how we're going to handle the library project in terms of its oversight. You know, is that something that the Budget and Finance Committee would take on as a thing, or is that a Government Operations Committee thing? And then there was also a question about, would we reconstitute the Utilities Committee, which used to exist, and Mr. Z has talked about that. Maybe he'd like to speak to that.
Thank you. I recognize that the Public Utilities Committee was set up, commission ostensibly for the purpose of helping to manage and guide the water system, which is no longer part of that, part of our system. So, but it seems to me that going forward, there are three things that are worthy of mentioning. First of all is the Stormwater Task Force will eventually come to a close, and they will come with a recommendation, and it might be useful to have a smaller group of council members. Right now, the PUC is composed of 3 council members, 2 citizens. Don't know that we want to keep it that way, but to have a buffer or run an interface between council and the citizens group, and just try to get this to the best possible spot before it comes to council, and to be able to also advise on the meaning of some of those recommendations, just so it could be of help to council making its final decision on what happens. We all know that the decision is likely not to do nothing, so whatever that something is. And then looking a bit further, we probably have an issue with, it's not really a utility, but it could be seen as a utility, the solid waste effort. Not sure it needs to be part of this, but it might be useful if it's a cross-cutting effort, something more than just an environmental thing that falls under a utility perspective as well. And it could very well become a utility if we want the solid waste collection to become, stay revenue positive instead of a loss center. And then if Richmond finally decides to, as I hope they will, pass the solar freedom legislation this year, that creates the opportunity for the city to stand up its own municipal-based renewable energy utility system, a muni as it were, and then we could take advantage of all the roofs that we've been asking the developers to clear out and provide us with room to put solar panels on top. And we have one being built right now. There's one, the Kensington, that's been completed, ready for that. Of course, all the schools and other developments being done, and all the city facilities. So it could be a big deal, and so certainly I think we would want a public-private citizen partnership to manage this effort going forward. I think we need to draw on the strengths of everyone in the city, and so that could be an arena for that. I guess I'm just saying that in going over this, that the Public Utilities Commission could be a major player going forward.
All right, I think you've got the support of all of us probably on that, Dan, so you made your case. Does anyone else want to be, how many people are supposed to be on that committee? 3?
We're 5?
Yeah, it's now in city code that it's 5 members and 3 are current city council members. And it's charged with management, advising council and city manager on the management of city water and sewer systems. So there would be some changes to city code. So you probably want to work session this and figure out how many members you think you'd like and how you'd like it set up and what the charge would be. And we could update city code, so.
Sure, we could do it at the retreat.
Sure. All right, you're number one.
All right, so if I got that started off, thank you. I'd like to hear more about that. Certainly, everybody here be eminently well qualified. I'd be interested in it possibly, but don't want to bump somebody off. Other positions, so just to be clear, the Cable Access Board, the way things stand now, we do not actually, all we would need to do would be just to appoint a council liaison. There's no voting role on the Falls Church Cable Access Corporation for a council member anymore. So if anybody's interested in doing that, Mary Beth's name was against it last time. I've been against that. I've been on that line too. Happy to try to go to some of their meetings and be a point of contact. Similarly, the Chamber of Commerce Board, if anybody else wants to get up Tuesday mornings at 8 o'clock and go to the board meetings, please let me know. I enjoy attending. Mary Beth goes as part of her day job. So that's something that we should discuss perhaps. And
I think Ross raised his hand.
Mary Beth was mouthing something to me. I couldn't tell.
There's something, another one.
Something.
Something,
Okay.
I didn't realize you were listening.
This is exciting.
She's
The
moving.
closer it gets towards
She's
me, the
moving
more I
on.
find out.
I've already overstayed my welcome and it's only the first meeting.
I'm happy to do it. I was actually going to ask about that one, but we can,
Okay.
Cable or chamber?
no, that chamber.
Gotta be clear what you're taking.
Yeah, Chamber of Commerce.
So do you want to talk about that one, or?
Yeah, let's
you wanna-
let's talk about it a little bit.
Celeste, do you have the matrix that shows when these boards meet, like we did last time?
Nope, I didn't do it this time.
Probably just so
We're not deciding this right now, correct? This is just
It's
a
for, it. we will do-
conversation. It's an
My
icebreaker.
impression,
Right.
Got it.
Yeah.
We're kind of furthering the
That's
conversation.
why Mary Beth's already moved on, but I'm moving too slowly.
But I can do. if
EDC,
I-
I'm for
If we're
keeping
not
with,
signing up for things that,
Right,
I'm for staying with the EDC.
okay.
What other notes that I have? Oh, Appointments Committee, is it necessary to have 3? Can we do 2 people on the Appointments Committee? I mean, I used to be on the Appointments Committee too. And as I recall, in my time there, it was hard to get 3 people to come.
It helps, I
You
mean, in
all
my
have been
opinion, it
very
helps to
diligent.
have 3 just because that can conflict with other things, given the timing of it. But
All the committees are like that, though.
that's a fair point. So we can get by with 2.
So that's just something.
Also, it doesn't actually always have to be on that day, right? If there were 2
Correct.
people appointed to the appointments committee who
Oh, man.
had a
Veronica's in charge. I
conflict.
just do what she tells me, but it's usually,
we can ask her to move it.
He goes where he's told. And
I
we're
think we
not,
could get by with 2.
and we're not talking about VML stuff. I just asked that I could be added to the list of members of the Economic Development Committee for VML. I was on it. Last list I saw, I didn't see my name.
They don't do that until springtime, but.
Yeah, okay.
We'll,
Just-
I'll send it out when it comes in.
Since the,
I think
and
they
then the
just
Legislative
finished.
Committee also. We talked a little bit about the Legislative Committee and what it does. Obviously, big, new, amazing things going to happen in Richmond in the next 60 days. Cindy has always been our lead on that, and Dave obviously has been involved in particularly the transportation-related elements of the Legislative Committee, but all the other issues too. You know, do we want a higher profile or a surge effort? Is everybody going to go down on local government lobbying day and, you know, wave the flag for Falls Church and our concerns? That's the kind of thing we should talk about. Whoever is on the legislative committee is probably less important than what we're all, each individually and as a group, going to do in the next couple of months.
Well, right now, 5 of you going to Ledge Day, which is great to have
Okay.
that big push. It is helpful to have the committee members, sometimes it ebbs and flows, this time I think it more ebb, that I can reach out and confirm something that pops up and to be able to message Ledge Committee support if it doesn't formally fit somewhere in your robust Ledge program.
That's all I have.
Do you have anything you want to change or talk about?
I really like the ones that I'm on right now. However, been the Aurora House Advisory Board representative for 6 years, and I feel like it would be good if someone else just knew more intimately what was going on at Aurora House. They only meet about 4 times a year, 5 times a year.
What day of the week do they meet?
It's Tuesdays usually, but it's a sporadic schedule. They sometimes have trouble making a quorum, and right now they actually need additional members. So it's a good group of people and a really interesting thing, but I feel like I know so much about it and others may not, so.
I'll pick it up if you want.
Want to take that one?
Sure.
And then I would be interested if Mr. Lickenhouse would surrender the library board. I would take that. I've never done that one before. That's what I was trying to telegraph to you before.
Got it.
Was that a yes?
That was a yes.
Yes.
Okay, Dave, do you have, was that it, or do you have other?
That's it.
And the cable access, were we keeping you on there, or did Mr. Duncan want that?
Yeah, you can do it if you want.
I thought we were offering it to others to see if anyone else wanted
Oh.
that one. I have not been a good representative. Yes, so.
I'll do it if nobody else wants to.
He wants his name in parentheses.
Dave, do you have any changes you want to make?
Yeah, just the COG, Human Services Committee, if anyone else wants to serve on that, we can do whoever can go, should go, so someone else who might be interested in that.
When does it meet?
It meets on Fridays around noon. And,
It's downtown?
It's downtown at COG, so,
But like what, every month or quarterly?
no, it's every couple months.
Every couple months, yeah.
I might be able to do that.
Okay.
I'll check with you on that later this week.
Anything else, Dave? Letty?
I'm pretty happy where I am, unless someone wants to arm wrestle me for any of the ones I've got. I think just like mayor and vice mayor, I'm very happy for people who choose to be on these, especially the regional ones that require more traveling. So thank you for those who signed up.
Ross?
Yeah, so just to be clear, Mary Beth, if you'd like library, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd like to do the
Not a
library.
problem. Dan, you're taking the AAB, right? Architectural Advisory Board. So I'm on urban forestry. I would like, just to confirm, Mr. Duncan, to be more involved with the chamber.
Got to go to all the ribbon cuttings. That's a big
I'll
part of the
ser- I'll
deal.
serve with Mr. Duncan. I'm kidding. Did you want to stay, you want to stay on the
A,
chamber?
you got to be a member. B, you got to go to the ribbon cuttings.
Yep.
So,
I take it you want to stay on the chamber?
it's certainly, I've been on it for, Lord, 20 years now. I mean,
Well,
if
I'm just
it's-
looking
if
for
it's time-
something-
If it's time for, I'm sure, I certainly love your involvement in the shop local, live local thing. That's been a big success. And so if you'd like to keep going every month, I think it's a good group. Sure.
Why don't you guys talk about it offline?
We'll talk about that
Figure out-
offline, because
figure
it's,
it out.
I'm trying to do, I'd like to get more involved in
Yeah.
some things that are economic development related. Now, look at the chamber or EDC, but I know those are near and dear to your heart. You'd also mentioned VML. The Economic Development Group on VML is something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah,
Actually
you
talked to
should do
Tommy
that.
Smeagol about it, our newly elected president. So
There's no
one of those three things that you've been interested or on, I'd like to talk with you about doing at least one of those.
Sure.
Wyatt, since the announcement of the regional kind of EDA for Fairfax, Arlington, and Alexandria, where is that going to be managed? Or is it staff level? Is it through NVRC? Is it?
So, I mean, NVRC kind of convened that group. A little bit of it was sort of kicking and screaming. I don't think they actually really were super dying to do something. They felt like they had their own efforts. But NVRC has been kind of pushing them together. And it's kind of in its infancy. And so I don't think it's really fully formed yet, what it's exactly going to be. But I think it's going to be under the rubric of NVRC or in association with NVRC. That's as best as I understand it.
Yeah, that's along with my understanding of it as well. And I think with some changes in the personnel regionally to the heads of these positions, the climate is
chairs.
more favorable than it has been in years past.
So, I mean, I think, Ross, did you come to the NVRC meeting?
I was at the NVRC meeting when the Economic Development Working Group convened for the first time to talk. Much more enthusiasm, I think, than they were initially pulled together. But honestly, I haven't seen anything formal come out in terms of an agenda. I do know that there was a conversation about people kicking in money, which was expected, but I haven't heard what that amount will be. But I think it's still very much in its infancy, but it looks to be led under like a subcommittee of NVRC.
So why don't you get involved in that, maybe through NVRC, and then you can maybe assist with that, and Letty, if you want to be involved as well, I don't know if you have an interest in that, but maybe between the three of us, we can work on that
Okay.
together.
I had one last comment, Mr. Mayor. Dan, talking with John from Fairfax, John Steele, the Chesapeake Bay and Water Resources Policy Committee, there's a couple folks within COG that are going to be putting together an urban ag initiative, and it's sitting underneath that subcommittee. And I just found this out during the annual holiday luncheon.
You want to be the rep?
Not necessarily, no, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention,
Well, I've been,
because it's a small piece of it,
yeah.
so.
And I think, after it gets all put together, more or less it's going to be teed up to the CEPC.
Right.
In the meantime,
No,
they got great lunches. You ought
No, I
to
think
go.
you do. I think you do a great job. I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
That's one thing about the chamber board, there's no.
How do we get them to say yes?
All right, why don't we, if there are additional comments, why don't we make them just between ourselves and with Celeste copied and try to move this along?
Yeah.
But what-
And when what's your deadline?
We'll be sending out the agenda package for next Monday's meeting on Thursday afternoon, so Thursday morning would be great to have everything together.
All
We have
right,
a good start here.
okay.
I do have one more thing to add to this, Mayor, and that is that I think all of us on council and on city staff have a common thought here that we don't want the library project to, let me phrase it positive. We want the library project to be a complete success, and we are going to do everything we can to help it become a complete success. So I propose that we set up a oversight might be too strong a word, may not be strong enough, but we set up a time-limited committee. I haven't thought this out fully, and it doesn't need to be by itself. It could be underneath something like, as Mr. Duncan said, government ops or budget finance, and it would draw from the strengths that people have knowledge in this, and we meet periodically, just to make sure that we understand what these early indicators of success would be, and we can report that. But, we can flesh this out at a retreat on the 25th.
Also be getting more information about the library in, I guess, the next week or so.
That's right. At your meeting next week, we'll have a briefing on the library project.
So that might be an appropriate time to further that discussion.
Actually, I'm looking here, this one that sunsetted on July 31st, 2018 was the City Hall Public Safety Improvements Task Force. So we have a model for that already.
Cool.
All right, why don't we move on to the next item, the discussion of the environmental chapter of the comp plan.
All right. So,
We actually have a citizen member of the ESC here, Mr. John Ward. I'd like to invite him to come up here.
very good. So we have a, Mr. Ward? We have a staff presentation that will be led by Kate Walker. And I'll just say briefly, by way of introduction, a tremendous amount of work has gone into this chapter with a great deal of citizen input, and we do have citizens that have just tremendous amounts of technical knowledge and passion in this area, and as does staff. And Kate has really been the one who has channeled all that energy into this chapter. Our goal tonight is to have a last review with the City Council, get final input on it, and this would be the last work session on this chapter prior to the Planning Commission taking it up towards the end of January. February 3rd, for their final action on it, and then the City Council for final consideration on February 10th. So with that introduction, Kate.
Thank you. I think you all know I'm Kate Walker. I'm the city's environmental programs coordinator. The version of the chapter that's before you now has been amended in line with comments received since it was last presented to you on September the 16th, and also some from the Planning Commission work session that immediately preceded it. So in September, at the Planning Commission work session, we had comments from Planning Commission members and also a significant comment from Ed Salzberg, who I'm sure many of you know is an expert in resiliency. So his comments are incorporated in this draft. There were some boards and commissions who had not reviewed the chapter before, so some of their comments are included. Of course, yours are addressed. And there was a public survey, an online survey. We did not have an enormous response to that public survey. I hope it's because everybody had already had their say. But those comments have also been addressed here. Significant changes, as I say, quite a lot of change in addressing resiliency in both the climate, air, and energy section and the stormwater section. The addition of the word energy to the climate and air section was a suggestion from the library board. It seemed sensible to make it clear which part of the chapter had it. The other I suppose, structural alteration we had discussed in the last work session where I presented to you the idea of moving our intergovernmental activities to the community section. So talking about community as both the small community that is the city, but also the wider communities in which we participate on a local, regional, national, and international level. So that's still there in all its glory, but it's moved to the community section rather than being just sort of appended in the introduction without a structural reason for being there. There was a little bit of wording change to the vision where it had said we would use the latest building techniques to achieve environmental effects, and that was changed to say that we would use the latest techniques and not restricted buildings to achieve beneficial environmental impacts, which seemed to state better what we ought to be doing. The Planning Commission reviewed this on the 2nd of December, and their 4 suggested edits have been included. 4 edits to the text, which are listed here in the staff report, and also 1 to the resolution. The resolution in the last whereas on line 295 talks about strategies and actions. It originally said approved, and a Planning Commission member suggested that it should say strategies and actions that should be pursued to implement the Falls Church 2040 vision. So those are the main changes. All changes have been highlighted in the text in red. I'm happy to field any questions.
All right, maybe before we get started, we could get some input from 2 of the folks who spent a whole lot of time on this earlier. Would anyone like to?
Let me just start. And this is under the stewardship of our environmental coordinator, Ms. Walker. That is a much improved product. It happened not by coincidence upon her return from her lengthy sojourn overseas. And so we were struggling on how to get this done, and we had 2 pieces basically. There was this large, very amorphous, cloud-like strategic piece, and then we had very detailed plans that some of us were just running down the road doing all this stuff. We couldn't marry them together, and then Kate said, "Well, we have. Why don't we do something in between? We'd write something that people can understand and points to actions, and then." So here we are after a few months later, and many starts and with the involvement of citizens like Mr. Ward. I've often said that it's the enthusiasm that's displayed by people who have a passion for this area, but the investment is exemplified by continued engagement, showing up, talking about this, and so, with that, if you'd like to say a few words, John, that'd be great.
I've kind of watched this whole process over about a year or so since we first started the early drafts on this, and really watched it I want to commend city staff, especially Kate, and as well as all the boards and commissions for a lot of really focused, attentive concentration on input. I've watched them sort of morph or converge, I think, in a couple, I think really represents what the citizens are interested in. Stormwater especially has taken on a greater role as we've gone forward, and the merger of the stormwater issues along with resiliency topics for in anticipation of more severe rain events under climate change in the coming decades. So I think it's going to be I hope looking at it, it provides sort of playbook for staff to work off of in the coming years, and sort of a roadmap for how to get citizen involvement, engagement to meet the vision that that is laid out in it, and as well hopefully guide the text and the policy guidance or suggestions for this council and other councils to help set budget priorities and zoning modifications as needed to meet the challenges we've got. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for your time as well and through this process. We greatly appreciate it. So do other folks have comments, questions? Ms. Hardy?
These are all on already, right?
They're all live, yep.
So, thank you. It was very much clearly reflective of a ton of work, so thank you to Kate and Dan and John and the ESC. I mean, I read through this back in whenever we saw it last time around. I tried to skim through it again and look through all the changes, and I was overwhelmed by the number of things we could do. I want to just highlight a couple things that have rung up high for me in terms of priority, because just like the housing chapter, the comp plan, there's so much we could do, but I think it's important to actually just start doing some of those things, because I think climate change just feels like it's an insurmountable issue, right, unless you just actually just start doing some things. And so a couple of near-term things that we've talked about that I want to make sure turn into projects, hopefully by the end of this year. One is glass recycling. I think Wyatt and I have talked about this. I think we are behind the ball on this, and we look like we are asleep at the wheel right now, because everyone else around us has changed how we are doing glass recycling. So I think we need to roll out the Purple Bin program, and that's what we're doing regionally, launch communications with the community about what to do about glass and single stream, which is currently just getting trashed. I think people will be pretty surprised. I think already people are starting to find out about what Fairfax and Arlington and others are doing and kind of doing it by themselves. So I think it would be great for us to do something in Q1, which is now. Second thing we've talked about is thinking about an electric fleet for our city cars and vehicles. And so as we look at whether it's upcoming CIP or whatnot, I think we've done this a couple years ago, looked at kind of the trade-offs and cost benefits of moving to electric versus buying the next upgraded whatever police cruiser. I'd like that to be a more regular part of our conversation every time we talk about our vehicles. It may cost us more in the short run, but I think as that cost comes down, it probably becomes more palatable for us to design that. Third is CPACE. I think it's been on the agenda to work on a while, but I think this is going to be important for the high school and the West End project, so that needs to be accelerated, and I'd love to see that be higher priority. The fourth is tree preservation options. So we've talked about this as it relates to stormwater, but I think clearly between residential redevelopment and flooding, we've talked about this before, but I'd love to figure out between the General Assembly session that's in progress now, what options do we have to kind of increase mature tree preservation, especially in single-family residential neighborhoods. And the last one, which hopefully is easier to implement, is I love the section in there around kind of communication, how do we encourage volunteerism. I think this is an idea that actually Chris McGow had, but I don't think he implemented before he left, is how do we make it easier for us to do those community cleanups beyond the twice-a-year projects? He had an idea of doing kind of creating a cleanup kit that you could just leave at the community center with gloves, the little grabber tools, trash bags, so that a Boy Scout troop who might be interested in a service project could just go pick up the supplies and go clean up 4 Mile Run without having to contact the city, wait for a big cleanup day. So I love the idea of kind of low effort ideas like that, where we could just make it easy for people to volunteer and contribute and not wait for 2 big city events that take a lot of resources. So hopefully lower kind of effort compared to the other ones, but I'd love to see ideas like that, because I started counting the number of strategies and actions, and there's so much we could do. And those for me in particular just rang out as, wow, let's make these really actionable so we can actually feel progress on this big chapter of important stuff. But thank you. Really appreciate all the hard work and the many iterations of this.
If I could just interject a comment here, it's easy for me to get credit because I'm the one who keeps presenting this to you, but this really has had a lot of input from planning staff and the Department of Public Works as well. And as John said, the ESC have been tremendous contributors to this project. So I'd love to take all the credit, but I think I should share it around.
All right, thank you. Other comments? Mr. Lichtenhouse?
Can you guys just clarify, in terms of timing, what's the difference between a short, a medium, and a long term? How do you see that in terms of years?
Well, the priorities are, I mean, the timeframes are listed there as 2, 4, and 6 years, but everything is flexible. The idea is that we have these things identified, we know how quickly we would like to do them, and we think we can do them. But everything depends on resources, both staff resources and financial resources. So if a grant suddenly opens up and we can apply for it and get it, then we might move a long-term project into the here and now.
Okay.
Similarly, if we lost a member of staff, something might not happen.
So some of these that are listed as medium and long-term, the reason I asked that is obviously there's funding associated with a lot of these. One of the things that I am most excited about when I think about economic and commercial development in the city is our ability to offer green amenities, right? So not just the taking back of public green space and parks, but truly doing something with that, whether it's a water feature, whether it's daylighting streams, whether it's creating some type of river walk down 4 Mile Run. I look at those types of projects helping check the box on a lot of the concerns that we have from an environmental perspective, but also are incrementally valuable to economic development in the city itself. And so I don't really know where we put that other than I look at comments related to, expanding the tree canopy fund for payments in lieu of plantings, which will help us to create some flexibility in terms of executing on some other projects. But, I would say as we look at additional commercial development in the city, we look at voluntary concessions related to things beyond just tree canopy and look at actual kind of green infrastructure, things that provide both an amenity as well as a solution to some of the issues that we're dealing with, whether it's stormwater or not. And so for me personally, it's one of the reasons that I'm actually excited about getting the Urban Forestry Committee as well, but looking at those types of, again, not just green space, but green amenities that are multifunctional. And so I would say for me, that's a priority within this. And again, I will second and third the comments made here about just the unbelievable amount of effort put into this. So thank you guys very much for that. And thanks again for your efforts, Kate. Appreciate it.
I know that everybody says there's a lot of actions and priorities here, but a lot of what you're talking about, the green infrastructure, would be part of the stormwater management plan, which is, it's one action hiding a whole host of subsequent action.
Right. Yeah, I think some of those things could be, shortened. So I would say I personally don't get hung up on the idea of medium and long term because it may take a long time to actually build something, but in the short term, we've got to create funding opportunities for that, and so we can't lose sight of it. And again, I look at things like urban agriculture. I don't look at that as a medium term. That's something we could do right now. But again, things that require funding, those green amenities, are things in the short term that we need to make sure that we're talking about before we actually execute on the construction and the delivery of those types of things.
Other comments or questions, Mr. Duncan?
I was able to see the Planning Commission's tape of the December meeting, so I heard your discussions with the planning commissioners, and these seem to reflect most or all of what they wanted to put in. Ross is right. I think that the strength of this is that hopefully it arms us to go out into, development proposals that we get and make the case for, call it what you want, Riverwalk, stream stroll, whatever, development that is centered around something green. That's what I think people want to see more of. The 12 or 13 most eligible redevelopment sites in the city that the EDC's looked at all would, benefit from a clean scrape, basically. They're all mostly impervious 1940s and 50s buildings. But, to replace that kind of use with something that's more modern, and the word that you used there was a good word, sensitive to environmental concerns, is what this document, I hope, will help us do. One thing Ms. Hardy said about recycling, I would And I did hear, that the exchange with the planning commission, at least as of early December, most of the members of the planning commission seem to have absolutely no idea what is the status of our recycling situation.
Yes.
And I confess I don't really either. I mean, it's only lately dawned on me that glass is going in the trash, and so we've started pulling it out and collecting it in the backyard. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but, so I would second what Ms. Hardy said about, the recycling program, at least for some of those of us who've been here a long time, was the gateway to environmental sensitivity. It was the first thing that we did with our kids as part of, the school program. And I know that big things have changed globally, but we need to have some story that is a little more compelling than what we're able to say here in this document, because I guess we just don't really know exactly what we're going to do. But I would encourage us to get to work on something, at least on glass, that would give people a sense of, reduce is one thing, reuse is another thing, but there's just a certain amount of recycling that is still going to be part of everyday life, and glass is a big part of that. So once this is done, go to it, and let's recreate a recycling for the 21st century.
All right, other comments?
Of course.
I'm just, the breadth of this is breathtaking. There's so much in here that it's almost hard to get your head around. So I see why it's taken so long, and I appreciate that you worked on the redo of it since this summer, I guess, when we had talked about it last, or we didn't talk about it, we were going to. So I do appreciate all that. I'm wondering can you just remind me, Mr. Shields, when we approve a comp plan chapter, in January, we're going to meet, we're in January. Later this month, we're going to meet and do a council work plan. How does that all fit together? These obviously are more than a work plan. They're many years on either end of a work plan. But are there touch points where a work plan then refers back to the comp plan chapters? Can there be?
So I would characterize it this way, that they kind of nest in each other. In all of your comp plan chapters, these are big citywide goals that have had tons of community input, and we're going to make progress on those things. The 2-year plan that the council develops is really the 7 of you identifying what are the most important things amongst all the things that need to be done, for the elected body. And so there is a triaging process, and it's kind of your chance to say, amongst all the universe of things that we do want to make progress on or change, here are the top 20, top 24, hopefully not much more than that.
But the work plan should then refer back to the comp plan.
Yes, that's right. They all inform each other.
All right, other comments? Mr. Snyder?
Just like 3 quick ones. First of all, I think for air quality purposes, we ought to find some linkages to our transportation comprehensive plan element. I think we're very good on stormwater and other things like that. I think we're not, I'd like to see more of an air quality element to this, and I certainly like the electric vehicle adoption, which just squarely goes to that. But I'm just wondering if there's anything we can do on that.
Part of the way I approached this was that I didn't want to repeat what's already been done in the transportation chapter, the
Absolutely.
mobility for all modes. So that is referred to in the climate and air section. It says, transportation is the 2nd largest greenhouse gas emissions source in the city, and a lot of the stuff about improving transportation is addressed in mobility for all modes. So, there is that tie-in. So, every chapter of the comprehensive plan refers to every other. I was hoping that would tie it together sufficiently, but certainly open to ideas.
Just a note, maybe it's already in there, and I didn't, but as you said, the leading cause, particularly in the service economy like ours, the leading cause of air quality issues is the transportation system. And so we ought to think about the transportation system not only as a transportation system, but as an environmental quality issue. So those, and if that's sufficiently done, then I'm fine. I'm not going to engage in editing.
Well, I think that the point you raised is well taken. It was a matter of some great controversy within the group that how do we marry these two things and how they refer to each other, and I would agree with you. That work may not be complete, and maybe the bent that we're looking at now is that we go back and perhaps put something in the mobility for all modes document that specifically calls out these things with the benefits, and there's nothing like a midlife refresh. I mean, it's hard to believe that, but the mobility for all modes is now, what, 3 years old? So we gotta give Stoddard something to do.
It's more than three.
All right, other comments?
Yeah, just two more. I was a little bit confused because at one point we say that we're preserving the tree canopy at 50%, but then there was something about we're at 46% and we're not sure whether we're at 46%. So I got tangled up in where we are, number
Okay,
one.
we are at 46, we want to head for 50.
Okay,
And the urban forest management plan is what will specify how we get there.
okay. And then in terms of tree canopy preservation, that doesn't mean every tree, even if it's diseased, or a tree that's interfering with utilities or something like that is going to be preserved. It means that we have an overall goal of doing what we can to preserve the existing tree canopy. Is that right?
Right.
There's kind of a rule of reason in there that I don't know if there's in a little bit of editing you could do, but
Okay,
I mean.
preserving tree canopy doesn't always mean preserving individual trees, though individual trees are important in and of themselves. It's really important to have mature trees because if you look at the environmental benefits that trees deliver, young trees consume quite a bit of energy to keep them
Right.
growing, keep them alive, and it's not until they're older and more mature that they start delivering the enormous environmental benefits that they provide. So we do specifically need to target the preservation of mature trees, but no, of course, not targeting the trees that are dangerous or unhealthy.
Or in sidewalks or,
Exactly.
whatever, because we do have a policy about making it easy for people to get around the city. So, okay.
Are there any other comments before I move on? If not, I'm not going to repeat what's already been said. I agree with it all. I would, I guess, just reiterate my support for this idea of electric fleet, particularly police cars, for a lot of reasons. I mean, I think it's a very visible sign of our values that we project to the rest of the area and maybe the whole country. I don't know how many jurisdictions have all electric police vehicles. Dan, you might know. Are there
Very
any?
few.
Yeah, and I don't know if anybody in the state of Virginia does. So anyway, I think that's exciting. I think it's also actually a branding exercise where people know they're in Falls Church. It's a way to project who we are beyond our borders. People still say to me, oh yeah, you guys have the Volvo police cars, and I'm sure everybody hears that. But it's true. And so to me, I think it's it goes beyond just the environmental aspect, which is major, but I think it has a lot of value. So I think it's something I would emphasize as something to consider going forward.
We could be going back to Volvos based on that statement.
We're not getting Teslas, though, are we?
There's nothing like the acceleration of electric motor.
Yeah.
I actually did send a document about electric police vehicles from the Urban Sustainability Directors Network to the chief and the sheriff today. So, and there are quite a number. There's a cooperative purchasing program through COG and also through the Climate Mayors Group that you're a member of, and also a number of grants. When we were originally looking at electric school buses, the electric school bus company gave me a whole long list of places to apply for grants for electric vehicles. So it's certainly on our radar and something that we are working on. Just because these things are not listed as happening right now doesn't mean we're not working on them. It's, when do we think we can have them successfully in place?
What is the deal on our police cars? I can't recall. Were we leasing them on like a 5-year cycle, or am I thinking of something else from Coons or something like that?
We're typically buying them,
Okay.
and we finance them over a 5-year period.
Okay. And when's the next, we just we kind of upgrade every year, or
Yeah,
do we
we
do
try
it
to
in-
do an annual refresh for a portion of it.
Okay. Anyway, that's something I think is
Yeah.
something we ought to be thinking about going forward. All right, unless there's any other comments on that particular area, why don't we move on to the next item, which is the FY20 budget amendment. Thank you again,
Thank you.
Kate.
Thank you.
As well.
Thanks, Kate.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
So we have Kieran Bawa here, and I think Danny Schlitt will join us for a portion of this discussion as well. So as Ms. Bawa is coming forward, I'll just preface this budget amendment with a couple of comments. First, there's good news in this budget amendment, and there's tough news in this budget amendment. Broadly, what this budget is not, is it is not using any of the fund balance that we've discussed in prior meetings, the FY19 budget carry forward, or the underspending in FY20 for debt service. We're not touching any of those funds because we will need to have another discussion on the potential use of those funds in the context of the library, in the context of City Hall, closing out the City Hall project, and other council initiatives. But since those projects are going to take up the lion's share of those available funds, they all need to be talked about together. So what this budget amendment is for is to address donations, grants, insurance proceeds, and things like that. That's the easy part of this budget amendment. However, we also have some tough things in it. Big Chimneys Park, we have increase in cost for Big Chimneys Park. The lion's share of those increases are related to stormwater improvements that we would like to make in Big Chimneys Park. Initially, we were not going to be detaining any stormwater in Big Chimneys Park because the neighborhood input for that park was they didn't want a dry well or a pond type of a feature in the park. So now but in the aftermath of the July 8th flood, we've gone back to the table to figure out ways, can we do things better on stormwater in this project? And some of those cost increases are in this budget amendment, as well as some just increased cost escalation, which has been part of the trend that we've really been grappling with. And then one other tough thing is dealing with the sanitary sewer project up for the West End project. Those costs have come in higher than originally projected, and we'll talk about those. They're not actually in this deck, but we want to discuss those with council tonight as well. So that's a quick overview. I would say thematically, it gives me no pleasure in saying this, but I think particularly over the next month, we're going to be having a number of discussions about dealing with capital projects and the higher than projected costs associated with them. And I'll just say, in general, this is causing us a lot of stress. We know when we talk about it, there's going to be some discomfort with that. And we're just dealing with a very difficult bidding environment. And the bids that we are getting are coming in significantly higher than our original estimates. So with that introduction.
And the timing is in vetting the numbers thoroughly before bringing it to council.
So are you the good cop? He's the bad cop? You're the good cop?
I think they're both
I'm the bad
cops.
cop.
I think they're both bad.
They're both bad cops.
Bad and worse.
Good evening, Mayor Tarter, members of the council. Happy New Year, everyone. So starting with the first budget amendment for fiscal year 20, I'll just bring some highlights. We are, as mentioned earlier, we are not asking for any new appropriation in general fund, only appropriations, well, not from fund balance, only appropriations that are for donations, grants, and reimbursements or reprogramming of funds in general fund. We are asking for new appropriations in sewer and sanitary fund, and we will look at those a little bit more in details. The ones that I would like to highlight for general fund is grants that are in items number 1 through 6 for housing, sheriff, police. The number 7 item is we are requesting an appropriation of $175,852 for the leaf mulch shelter. As you recall, we brought that as a potential need when we were talking about the year end. This is the moving of the leaf mulch due to the school project. The estimated cost is $184,000. And $175,852, we are projecting to use the insurance proceeds that we received this year for the Hillwood Avenue traffic signal, the damages that were done from the storm last year. Those were dealt in last year's operating savings underspending. So the proceeds were not received last year, so we couldn't record those. We received this amount this year, and we are requesting to use that instead of any of the fiscal year 19. So that would be appropriate use of the proceeds. Item number 8, $132,217 is a grant that the city is receiving for police, for public safety, for city's emergency communication systems. The details still need to be worked out on this because it's over a period of 2 phases. It's going to be implemented in phases, so we are still awaiting details, but those are the information we received on the amounts and the grant award, so we're requesting an appropriation. Item number 9.
Can I just pause just for a moment on that one? So the good news is we do have a state grant that will help pay for our conversion to Next Gen 911, which is important and we need to do it. The bad news is working with Verizon, the potential cost will be higher than $132,000. So that's the additional detail that Karen is referring to, and Chief Gavin is kind of scrambling right now to work through some options. So this is sort of the good news piece of it, the state share of it. The bad news piece of it is the choices we need to make in order to fund, to actually roll out the technology to allow people to dispatch, call 911 by text or by other means, which is the essence of Next Gen 911. One other feature of Next Gen 911 is pinpoint accuracy on cell phones. When you call in, it will get you down to 2 feet of where your cell phone is, whereas currently the systems they use is a much broader radius. And so it'll address that complaint that we've been getting.
So you're telling us it's going to cost more than the 132 that's going to
Yeah,
be paid by
that's,
grant?
from a budgeting perspective, this is an evolving situation.
Is the state going to help any more beyond this?
I think this is it from the state.
That we should go to Richmond and ask for?
We're
Everyone
working
has to
through
do it?
options with Arlington County. I think that's probably where our greatest likelihood of trying to get this into a realm that we believe we can afford.
Is that technological leap made possible through the repeater antennas that we don't want put up on every...
The 5G?
Yeah, every light pole? I mean, is that the upside of it? It can find my cell phone more exactly?
I'm not the best person to speak to it, but what it does is it draws from multiple sources. So 5G would be one, but Wi-Fi is another, or using GPS plus GLONASS, and multiple systems.
Brings them all together, Cox and all the cables.
Synthesizes it to
Everybody's
get you a
network.
much more accurate read.
Item number 9, $82,508. This is the interest income that we earned on the 20 million note, the short-term note that we issued back in May. The interest on that was at 1.99%. Total amount due was 145 change, and it was offset by the interest that we earned because we got the full 20 million and we put it in an interest earning account. So we just want to recognize the interest that we earned, and that would be used to pay a portion of the 145. The remaining, we'll use the debt service that was budgeted in 20 to pay the difference. Item number 10 is insurance reimbursements for repairs and replacement of property and police vehicles, sheriff vehicles, and small amount that we received for storm damage to the public works storage shed in the yard. Item number 11 is $50,000 expected in rental income from the bike share program. That would be used towards the cost associated with the program. So the grant pays for any amount that's over and above the rental income, so we need to recognize that as
revenue.
So we're not, it's not a profitable venture, the bike share?
It's cost covering, but not
It's just cost covering?
Yeah.
No, okay.
Well, it doesn't even cover the cost, though, right? It's cost losing, like save for the grant, correct?
Well, the grant will pay for everything over the rental income, so we have to recognize the rental income.
But without
Got
the
it.
grant.
But it's not 100%
Yeah, without the grant,
cost
it's not cost.
How much does it lose without the grant?
Well, the grant was, the operating grant was, is roughly 400,000 over a 2-year period.
500,000. I have to get the latest from Carrie because she was monitoring, because it's a new rollout. But regionally, we were seeing 60 to 75% recovery. We're smaller, and so we're definitely not there as growing and as utilized.
When do the
But we're
grants
just
run out?
Starting.
So when we were forecasting, we were anticipating about 33% cost coverage by users, and the remainder covered by the grant. Our first review of the first summer was a little better than that 33%. Then we went into the winter months, so I haven't gotten the most up to date, but
The grant
33 was
is-
what we were
yeah,
thinking.
The grant's a
when we
5-year
went in.
grant,
33%.
and we can reapply for, this is Community Choice I-66 grant funding.
So how many years we have left on that grant?
It's 3 by chronological date, but we're negotiating with MVTC to extend it because we had a 2-year delay in rolling out bike
Got it.
share because of MBTA money. So we probably have a good 4 years, but we're still in the grant.
When do we have to start applying for the next grant to make sure that we're not in the hole?
Not this grant cycle, but the next one's in 2 years.
And that's on our list, I
Yeah,
assume.
it's in the grant application list.
I mean, also in addition to that, it's a ways off, but we ought to consider developer TDMs as a way to pay for this. In other words, to get reduced parking or whatever, they make contributions towards the city's bike share plan.
To the
Just a
operating
thought.
costs.
Yeah.
And council has done that on the last couple of VCs. It's been capital and operating, and that certainly will help.
On the next page, so that's all for general fund. So before we go, sorry, I have one more item for general fund that's not here, and that is carry forward of 71,771 in unspent and unencumbered transient occupancy tax that is allocated for the wayfinding, tree lights, pole plants, the downtown plaza. So it was unspent in fiscal year 19. We want to carry it forward associated with the same project-related kind of costs. Sanitary sewer fund, we are requesting 100,000 new appropriation from fund balance for operating, 50,000 to go towards the council-approved program for sanitary sewer backflow device, which would be up to 2,000 per resident kind of grants that we, reimbursement, sorry, that we discussed, and 50,000 additional for salary and benefits of a new full-time permanent engineering position for the rest of the position, for the rest of the fiscal year. That would be funded 50% by sanitary sewer and then 50% by stormwater. There is another request of 30,000 for engineer temporary position for managing the stormwater task force related activities. And an additional 100,000 request for stormwater fund appropriation from fund balance to repair the retaining wall that was damaged during the July 8th flood. The fund balances for sanitary sewer as of June 30th is 8.4. And I'll delve into the details a little bit later. And the stormwater fund as of June 30th, 2019 was 2.1 million. On the CIP, we are requesting 2 requests for reprogramming. First one is reprogramming of funds for Big Chimney, 150,000. Leftover remaining funds from Larry Graves' turf. That project is complete. There is a balance of 80,000. We would like to reprogram that to Big Chimney, and Howard E. Herman, 30,000 remaining from that park improvements, and then
40,000 of the park master implementation for this year's CIP budget to go towards this, making it a total of additional 150,000 for the Big Chimneys project for to redesign the water runoff management plans.
What projects in the master plan do we expect to necessarily take a back seat if we're pulling $40,000 away?
Actually, it was going to go towards some of the parks in improvements, and this is very much in line with I do not know what.
So the biggest thing we're trying to do, Danny,
You'll need to come up
Danny,
to
would
the
you like to come up
microphone.
to the table?
Oh, good, perfect.
But we were
timing.
planning to use it particularly for trail upgrades. And so one of the value engineering options was to have the trails not be paved or paved with asphalt as opposed to concrete. And so we were dipping into the Park Master Plan funds for trail improvements throughout the park system to target to have this be the upgraded trail that I think the community wanted in the Rec and Parks Advisory Board.
To go from asphalt to concrete.
That's absolutely right.
on
And
Big
so
Chimneys.
the money that was in the CIP specifically, originally specifically for trail work, some of that's being taken out to change from asphalt to concrete in this park. So it's still going to be used for the development or the construction of the trails.
Just not for trails in other areas.
And it still will, we're not using all of it, obviously, so.
It's 100,000 total.
Well, out of that particular one, that's not 100,000, that one's 40,000 out of the Park Master Plan. So the remainder of the 150 for this year would go towards the first sections, pieces, if you will, because we took a larger dollar amount and did it over a 3-year CIP period. So the trail improvements will continue in all the other parks.
Okay.
So what did we do right with Larry Graves and Howard Herman that we came in under budget and have money left over that we can't do with everything else?
We had big estimates to start with.
That's the secret.
I mean, it's good news, right, that we have, I mean, and I like the idea of using leftover proceeds from 2 park projects on another park project, not that it's good news that we do, although I agree with wanting to do more stormwater, like while we're digging up Big Chimneys, we really should take care of stormwater for that area. But given your preface, Wyatt, about how we should be prepared for bad news over the next month across the board, you know, it's a little bit of silver lining here that we have 2 projects that came in really well and have leftover money that we're redeploying.
Each project has its own story, you know. and
Yes,
our
having
game-
excess is not actually necessarily good news.
I have a little bit of a theory. I don't know if you really want to hear it right now. But we started this project so long ago, and the dollars are put in, and then Big Chimneys. So this is the one that we're going over on, and the other ones, I think, were more set and succinct, and we were there. Big Chimneys started in a much different way, and then it became a partial, you know, there's some stormwater fixes, so those were monies that weren't originally put in. There's a process that I guess that we went through in this one in particular that included a design that was brought forth by the citizens, the advisory board, staff, that was probably, that you spend, I'm not going to get too far into it, but the architecture engineering, you spend all this money, and then you start value engineering, you're paying architects and engineers to create a more high-level thing, and then you pay them again to drop it back down. So you're spending a lot of soft cost money creating something. I think there's some valuable lessons I've certainly learned from this. And so moving forward, I think the next park build we do, you start at a very base level, and you have some add-ons you can put in, as opposed to starting pie in the sky, paying to have it dropped back down, and you spend, and then the construction cost that everything else is hit. It's just, I think the cost of construction.
Are there things that we could have done differently with the 301 West Broad development to mitigate stormwater runoff into that site that's, I would imagine, maybe has exacerbated the issue there?
No, the water really is, it's coming from the neighborhood into the park or from the park. If you recall, we have that berm, and so there isn't water coming from the north of the park through the park.
Okay. And what about,
Can I make one interjection too? We're talking about this 150,000 here, but that's not the full story on Big Chimneys. We also have $180,000 of funding that's on the next page that is for stormwater improvements associated with Big Chimneys Park as well. And so for these would be for pipe improvements along Shirley Street, inlets along Shirley Street, and also increased detention from the runoff from Big Chimneys Park. So when we're thinking about Big Chimneys Park, it's really 150 plus 180. Granted, with the scope now going well into Shirley Street to deal with the whole thing.
So you're into Virginia Village, you're into the quads.
That is correct.
how much does that Bowl America site contribute to the problems for stormwater over there? I mean, that's just one massive impervious surface. Do we know? Is it significant?
I don't know the answer, but
From the
That's a massive
engineering
structure.
though, are we taking water from I know that in the back of from my personal observation, there are big ponds that build up on the back side of the bowling alley. Now, whether that was in the engineering calcs, I think we need to ask Alan Dalton that question. I don't know the answer to that. Perhaps you do.
I don't.
So do we have a GMP for Big Chimneys? We've signed so did we do a change order or are we contemplating a change order for on-site detention?
Yes, there was some changes made in just the last few weeks that have required us to go back a little bit to the drawing board to do some more of the stormwater stuff, make some pipes a little bit bigger, and so that's been an ongoing change. But the contract for, there's a couple different contracts going on, one for the playground equipment, some for the pipe work in the streets, and then the actual construction inside. And there's a piece that is tied to the project that is still being weighted until council has had a chance to see all this for the final piece of the contract. But the price is already set, if that's what that was your original question, I think.
Well, not exactly, but I think you sort of roundabout explained it anyway. So we're going to do a change order. We're contemplating a change order to what's already been essentially negotiated to add additional stormwater detention.
At this point, I wouldn't call it a change order. I would say the contract's broken into a couple pieces. One of them comes later for the final
Task order or
pieces.
something like that, an additional task order?
Yeah,
This isn't cost plus, right? Is it GMP?
no, it's not, and the price is already set, and that's why I'm saying it's an already identified change order, if you would.
Okay, I mean, I'd say it seems like a lot of these construction projects just keep, like they never pull in, they don't come home, they're always just kind of wandering down, which I know is totally weird.
So this is an option or an ad that was previously negotiated or as a known cost, and you had a choice of executing it at some point in the contract or not?
The change that I'm talking about is specific to, because of the floods back this past summer, the city changed some of its requirements. This construction project, since it wasn't already underway, was required then to make those changes. So those pipes are now required under the city code for stormwater. So those changes are being made while we're going through this process to get to make sure all the funding is in place. But the numbers are set and the contract's already, the first phase is already signed, and we're just holding off on the last phase to do that, put a purchase order together and finish that piece of the project.
So how much are we talking about? And I know it's in here, what's the price?
For the stormwater piece specifically, so that discrete stormwater items that you're referring to is the 180 that's being paid for out of the stormwater fund, is my understanding. Is that correct?
And that's the next items, 12 or 13 or whatever the next thing, the next page.
That's the line 221.
D1.
All right.
So we move to that, just a thought about that. I know the smoke that gets bigger the more we chew it, but if we're gonna do work in the Virginia Village area, is there a way to do it in a way that's mindful of the comp plan's long-term vision for that space, which is not its current use? Or is this something we're just gonna pay now and tear up when we redevelop that area?
Well, we're going to a set manhole that is already in Shirley Street, so we're tying into that existing infrastructure. We're tying into it with a larger facility and with detention. I think the detention is actually in the park, not in Shirley Street.
Correct.
So that's the more expensive piece of it. The pipe, however, and the additional inlets, if we did ultimately redevelop the whole park or that whole neighborhood, that would be a sunk cost or a lost, presumably that infrastructure would be in the way. It's a bit hard to say exactly, but.
Going back to your point, so I'm thinking about it a little bit more. You're probably, I mean, your central thesis is that would it have cost less? Could we have been more efficient with the funds if we had done it this way from the very beginning, instead of changing the design after July the 8th? And the answer has to be yes. I mean, it's just you can't have these things out of sequence. So how much more? How much we're paying for this inefficiency? I mean, the architects and engineers will tell you, even though they do it digitally, that it costs more to erase than it does to draw. First place, so take a guess, 25% is saved?
Well, I mean, just sort of goes back to Central, so we've had recently, which is a series of cost overruns of civic projects that are just, I think, frustrating to a lot of folks. What else you got here?
Okay, we have another request for reprogramming of funds. That one is in Transportation Fund, 35,000 to move from, and that is from deallocated funds from the traffic signal project to pavement project, South Maple Road reconstruction, 35,000.
What is deallocated?
It was not allocated by VDOT. They have a priority list, so they did not allocate the funding in this project as we had anticipated. So we're moving.
So they're not going to work on that light?
Not at this point, it's still in the CIP, but it'll be in an out year. Because we'll have to go get funding for it. In the meantime, we needed the money for the South Bend reconstruction.
Is that important for the Founders Road changes further up west? So if we don't do this one with the intersection at Park and West and the new Founders Road, not working on Lincoln and West, will that have be an issue in 18 months or 2 years?
Founders Row was designed knowing that we weren't proceeding with this one, I believe, but we can confirm.
Yeah, the Lincoln and West is intended to take the signals off of the power poles and install mast arms like we've done at Cherry and West and Great Falls. So it was an overall intersection improvement to make it more pedestrian friendly as well. That was in the 6-year CIP, and with that, with this VDOT action, we need to delay that project and kind of get it back in queue. Now, your question is, does it have a bearing on Founders Row? No. That signal functions fine, it's just not as walkable and as we'd like it to be.
Sanitary sewer fund, we are requesting a transfer of $972,000 from Dorchester pipe bursting project to the West End sanitary sewer project. These are unspent appropriated funds, and this project is complete, the Dorchester pipeline bursting. The West End sanitary sewer expansion project is just starting on, and another request, as Mr. Shields mentioned in the beginning, we would request an additional appropriation of $1.4 million for the West End sanitary sewer expansion project for construction, increased costs of construction, steel related. This would be the line that runs from the high school to Route 7. And the fund balance, we're requesting from the designated availability fees fund balance as of June 30th, 2019 was $1.7 million. And the unrestricted fund balance is 6.6, so currently we have a 8.35 million, of which we're requesting the 1.4 from the availability fees for this.
And so all of that will be covered by fees when the developer comes in for their tap fees and the like?
Yeah, so they will, we anticipate that the sewer tap fees will be north of $4 million that'll be paid for the development of the site. So that will reimburse the availability fees for this project. The sewer fund does have some big expenses coming up, though. We have further pipe expansion downstream of the actual work of the new line that we're putting in. And we also need to have discussions with Fairfax County about purchasing additional capacity for the flows that go ultimately to the Alexandria Renew plant through Fairfax County. So we're working together sort of a comprehensive financial plan, but this work is here and now, and it's on the critical path for the high school to open. But what is sort of part of the overall theme here is that this, and this is one that was pretty tight. I mean, we had cost estimates that are really only about 9 months old from 2 different engineering firms, and we competitively bid them, and the prices are coming in about twice what the engineering firms projected them to come in at. So that's.
What does that say, though? I mean, you know, I mean, sort of, to me, I'm trying to figure out, what does that mean? Does that mean the engineering firms don't know what they're doing? Are costs truly escalating like double in 9 months? That seems sort of hard to believe. It just seems sort of systemic that our estimates are not matching up with cost. And I get it that we're in a inflationary period for construction costs, but it seems like it's far and away beyond what you would expect. So I mean, I don't know what to say. I guess it sort of goes this lessons learned what we want to do, right, is try to figure out how we can do better going forward with this. And
Don't our conversations with other jurisdictions yield similar results or not? I mean, are other jurisdictions getting these sorts of escalations in their estimates versus actuals? I don't know, I just remember down at VML, I asked some random engineer or something like, what sort of contingency should we build in? He said, oh, you know, it's got to be 40% or whatever, some phenomenal number.
Yeah.
Well, underground work is, you know, you can only plan so much and then account for the known unknowns, and after that, you know, all bets are off. The price of materials could be anything. We don't know what future tariffs with regard to concrete or energy costs. And all the engineering, architecture firms are caught behind the 8 ball on this. You know, they're not really smart enough to account for it because they all depend on national databases. National databases by design are forensic. So, you know, they can't project forward and say, based on this, it's going to be this when it's actually going to be that. So.
That's a good way. I mean, it's very important that we be able to communicate what we're doing here. We all share that anxiety, but what you just said that's a good thing for people to understand. It's not like there's failings that are of a personal nature or that we just have particularly bad engineers that we select. I don't think it's that. I think it's more things that are way, way bigger than our little 2.2 square miles that doesn't make our planning job any easier, but you do have to acknowledge that we're not the only ones who are having this issue.
Our kind of procurement process, we get the estimates from the engineers and then we go out and we bid this. I mean, what I have seen in the commercial real estate industry is that certain segments of the industry, I would say the industry as a whole, are so busy and have so much work stacked up that they're almost bidding, throwing a crazy number out. It's like, if they'll take it, I'll do it, but if not, I got all this other work I can do, and they don't care. I mean, I've talked to a number of clients that have come across that, or they put it out there and they just get some ridiculous bids back because people are effectively putting a number out there just to see if they'll get it because they got so much work going on. That's a function of the economy that we're in. But, I mean, from a procurement process, how wide can we cast our net in terms of the cost estimates that we go out and ask for amongst those in the industry? Can we cast it wider to maybe mitigate some of that?
I mean, we cast it wide. We put it in all the places where it needs to be, and we get good responses. It's just that the numbers aren't what we expected.
There's a limited number of respondees, and you see them over and over again. You might get a variation of, maybe 10%, somebody from North Carolina needs to work, but traditionally, the Myers construction and the rest of them, Fort Myers, for that kind of work. But, you said Fairfax, this is like the Russian-Ukrainian pipeline, Nordic One, different kind of natural gas, if you will, going the wrong way. I know, I knew you'd pick up on that. So what is the surcharge from Fairfax of rerouting or whatever it takes to get to the new treatment plant? Dave Steiner likes this too. Thanks so much.
Who's Ukraine in this story?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to figure out who's getting gas.
I feel like we are. So that's all by formula, and I don't have the numbers right on my head, but there's a fee that the plant charges, and then there's a transport fee. And when we get into this discussion about purchasing capacity, we're going to go through all of that with you, and that would be a Public Utilities Commission item to give the deep dive. One other aspect of it is back in the 1990s, the city purchased capacity from Alexandria, which we have never, from Arlington, which we have never used. And so one part of the discussion is, could we trade some of that excess capacity to Fairfax County for the capacity we need on the trips run side? And so there's some potential that could be successful, but that all needs to be developed.
Sounds like the water system all over again.
For communications to the public, it might be helpful if you could put some of this in a memo or in something that people can understand, that puts it in context about what we're seeing and why, and we're not alone in that, because I think people are seeing, I think you've heard it, people are seeing, more costs than were predicted. And I think people are saying, is that just bad management, or is that stuff that's going on out there in the market in terms of tariffs and everything else? So it might be helpful, to just pull a little bit of it together so the public can readily understand. I mean, we're communicating tonight on this, but I suspect that the public pickup is probably not that great. So I think something that might be useful is understand the context in which we're operating. Because if you're not in construction, I think you maybe miss some of this stuff, but if you're in that field, you see it all over the place in terms of the increased costs. That just a thought for.
What else do you have, Ms. Powell?
Stormwater Fund, requesting an appropriation of $430,000, $180,000 as discussed for inlets adjacent to the big chimney on Shirley Street, and $250,000 to pay for the survey analysis associated with the improvements at 6 identified HUTS project areas.
And that's to cover what the task force is doing effectively.
Just the work, not any of the projects, right?
To summarize, requesting an appropriation of $609,040 for general fund, supported by grants, donations, reimbursements from insurance and other restricted revenues. Sanitary sewer, requesting an appropriation of $1.5 million, $100,000 in operating and $1.4 million in CIP, and $610,000 for stormwater, $180,000 for operating, and $430,000 for CIP.
Those were sort of wrap-up numbers?
Yeah, those are wrap-up numbers, yes.
So what is the bottom line here? In other words, based upon the, use the term surplus, but I don't really mean to use that term, but you know what I mean. Like, what does that leave in terms of available funding?
So the year-end balances that we reported out in the previous council meetings, the 1.9 million from, 2.5 million from last year and the 1.7 from this year remain in the fund balance. We have not included any request for appropriation of those funds as part of this budget amendment. That will come separately as the following budget amendment.
So whatever this number is, it's not coming out of the 2.5
4.2.
plus
So this is in its entirety, either reallocation of grants essentially,
Yes.
or money from our own funds, stormwater, for example, fund.
Right.
But none of this is from like our cash, essentially from operations.
280 is from fund balance.
But it's sanitary sewer, not general fund.
Not general fund,
Not
fund
general
balance.
fund, yeah. The 4.2 is general fund. The sanitary sewer and the stormwater is coming out of the fund balance, as mentioned. However, general fund, the surplus or the underspending, the year-end balances were in the general fund, which, as part of this amendment, we're not requesting at this time.
Would be helping, because we've been talking about so many numbers. There's a chart that shows here's
Yeah.
fund balance in each of the different funds.
Sure.
Here's how much is underspending in each of the different ones. Here's how
Sure.
much we're recommending we take out from each one, so we have an accounting.
Yeah,
Three
so,
lines for each
so the
bucket.
ones that you would need for that would be the sanitary and the storm,
Yeah.
because that's the only ones we're taking.
But I think a chart would be helpful to show.
As
'cause we
part
could-
of the next Monday, I think we can provide it.
And for
For
FY19
sanitary
versus
sewer.
20, because we've been also mixing up years too.
But can we
For the
not do the
enterprise
general
funds-
fund?
Is enterprise funds all from 9?
They're,
20?
the enterprise funds operate a little bit differently in that their, their fund balances just kind of are what they are.
And then all we're doing
And,
is moving some money from
So
one
we'll
of
be able to
those.
show what the,
Putting in a checking
if we
account.
use these funds for those purposes, what your resulting balances are.
Chart would be helpful.
For the two funds that we're requesting.
Well, the three,
appropriation.
just to show general fund,
We don't
because we've
need
been
a
talking about the
chart
numbers,
to
I think it
show
would be helpful to say, we're not talking about this for now. Because I think we have been talking about underspending from that first general fund balance.
Okay.
So it would be nice to show, here's the numbers we talked about back in December. Here's the numbers for stormwater, here's the number for sanitary. Here's what we're recommending we take out from each one. That's helpful. Therefore, we end up with these numbers.
And then the other bottom line is if we go to page 7 of 13. So essentially our general fund, so when you're building the 2021 budget, will you use 99,901,000 or 99,291,000 as the current year revenues? So when we're saying we're going to increase by X percent in 2021, will we use these new revenues as the
So
baseline?
the 3% is over the tax revenues. The increase here is just the grants and reimbursements. They're
Right.
not part of the math.
How about the expenses? Will we,
Those will be all inclusive of the total that we would, but these are going to be expended in this year, these grants and.
right, I know, but you know, when you build the budget, you always say this fund is going to increase by 1.8%, this is going to go up by 4.2%.
So we're gonna go
So
off
what's our-
budget to budget, so we'll go off of the 291 number,
291.
the lower number.
Okay,
That
So
was the
these
number.
increases are one-time use.
one-time use of funds.
They won't, if,
Okay.
Okay, is there anything else on the budget items? If not, thank you very much for your good work. Thank you as well. Thanks for sticking around and coming out tonight. And we'll follow up this conversation next week. We'll have a chart to better analyze and look at this as well. But thank you all for coming out. How about we move on then to council schedule?
So this requires two votes, right? So we'll vote this
does.
week and then 2 weeks from now?
That's
on this
correct.
one?
The 13th and the 27th.
And we're going to have a second budget amendment that will overlap with this, that will also take 2 votes.
that's
Yeah,
correct.
that's gonna
So
happen.
we'll
Totally
call this,
Yeah.
we'll call this budget amendment number 1, and that would be budget amendment number
Vote number 1 on budget amendment 1.
Right.
Yeah, and if City Hall is not done, ready for 2, then we'd never be able to.
Yeah, that's, maybe you need to color code it. This is the 2019, this is the 2020.
That corresponds to that color in the chart, so we know what part of the
On
money we're
hindsight,
This
we
is code
could have come
orange,
with
this is
this.
code red.
Thank you. So now on to council schedule. Is there any scheduling items people want to talk about?
MLK days are a day of service. Well, I had asked whether HHS had any ideas for need. I think Mary Beth had a suggestion of, in light of what we talked about earlier, doing like a community cleanup. We'd be happy to help pick up trash, perhaps. That's something that's easy to organize if there's no immediate service need elsewhere. I'm signing us up. The grabbers are a lot of fun. My kids love those.
Grabs are awesome.
When is the cleanup?
On Martin Luther King Jr. Day?
It's on
What
that?
time?
That's usually the day of service, but we
Day
can
of
schedule it
service.
so that it doesn't conflict with the march, since the march
There's
is
a
now in the
gap,
morning.
though. there's a gap. The
Yes.
march is in the morning, then there's a gap, and then there's a service or a
I
ceremony.
haven't seen this timing, so.
So there's a couple hour gap to
No,
do
I
service.
don't think
Yeah, there
so.
was.
Starts at 9 and goes till 12:30, I thought.
There's a gap. There's a service fair in the middle there where you could go around and talk to different organizations that offer service opportunities. But it's a pretty big chunk of time.
It is a couple
Yeah.
hours, as I
Yeah.
recall.
So we're not.
Why don't we get the information? Why don't you two coordinate it? Do you guys want to organize it?
Sure.
And then get the information from Ed or Nikki or whoever and sort it out. But
Well,
yeah,
if Nancy had something that she wanted us to do, we're happy to do that too, but
I'll ask her. Yeah.
thank you.
okay, other council schedule items.
Are we doing the retreat on Saturday, the 25th?
So that would be my main question for schedule. We're starting to put things into place, and so we'd like affirmation that the 25th works for everybody.
I want to give the affirmation by tomorrow.
Okay.
We do it? Everybody just make a note tomorrow. Send lights on the, I think it's the 25th, a Thursday of January. NVR, is it 23rd? NVRC is going to do it's like a roundtable on affordable housing. And so there'll be people from all the jurisdictions in Northern Virginia, and also some discussion of what they do internationally. So if anybody has any interest in attending, that's the last Thursday, the fourth Thursday in January at the Northern
23rd?
Virginia Regional Commission. I thought it was the 25th, but it sounds like it's the 23rd. whatever.
Thursday?
It's
Thursday is a Saturday. right?
Thursday,
25th is a
23rd.
Saturday.
Thursday
Okay,
is
it's 23rd then.
Is that an evening thing or day?
Yeah, 7:30 at night,
It's the NVRC.
Northern Virginia Regional Commission. yeah. So it's just going to be a symposium on affordable housing ideas, like from different jurisdictions, and also get some international, one person's going to speak.
We have staff going, or?
Yeah, staff, I think staff may present, they're actually, is staff presenting at this?
They haven't told me about it, but I'll get up to speed
I
on
think
it.
so. Staff from various jurisdictions are going to say what they're doing, innovative new things or whatever. So it's just to share ideas, but anyone who.
It's at NVRC?
Yes. So anybody who wants to attend, welcome, would be interested.
Hey, what are the hours of our retreat?
It's usually like 6 or 7 hours.
9 to 3?
It's not that long, is it?
I gotta
It
look.
just felt like that. I don't think it was actually that long.
Lacrosse game at
It
3
seems
o'clock.
that way.
It was like 3 hours
I think
with
we-
plenty
No,
of pizza.
no, we always go
It was
9 to 2. I mean,
Yeah,
That's
Nine-
close.
9 to 2 is.
What time's
has
your
been
lacrosse
standard?
3
Oh,
out
yeah,
at
we-
the St. James.
be done by then.
It'll be 9 to 2.
Yeah.
All right.
The most important part is always the last 15 minutes. That's
Yeah.
what deals get done.
Is that new pizza place open by then? Bad pizza?
Bad, yeah, that's
Bad pizza?
It'll look the same
Man,
as a
I've been-
week ago.
oh, I've died to try that
That's what I'm
place.
saying. Why don't we?
If it's open,
Encourage them.
Yeah,
wings,
yeah.
lots of wings.
I guess you'll get dibs for everybody.
What about Jersey Mike? I forgot to bring the coupons for Jersey
I'll
Mike.
take Jersey Mike's.
They
too.
open Wednesday. so-
Smorgasbord of the latest and
The
greatest
latest food.
restaurants around the city.
Dumplings.
That dumpling place is amazing. Have you been there?
No, I.
What?
Terrible.
Oh, man.
Those dumplings are terrible, as an Asian too.
Well,
Dan
that is
tried
true.
Standards. Lenny has the highest standards.
Dan's shaking his head too, so.
I believe
You
we
don't like
are
it,
being
Dan?
recorded for posterity. so.
All right, any other schedule?
At at the last council retreat, I just, like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna do this? We've done different formats. Last time we invited all the boards and commissions to attend, asked for their input. Do we wanna do that again? Do we wanna have a separate planning meeting for this?
I think it would be good to have like a little elite team to help plan it with staff. And so if there are any volunteers for that.
Oh, we talked about it Wednesday morning a
Wednesday,
little bit,
yeah.
get some more details for who's interested. Everyone's one of those
It'd be
people.
great to have that. And I would offer to the council Earl Haddad to facilitate it. He's doing leadership training and facilitation for our top staff, and one of his first tasks would be to help us support the retreat, but also when we get the impulse from the council on your priorities, to turn that into a good work plan and engage the staff more in that than we've done in the past. So that's one feature of it, and hopefully that'll be effective for the council.
Okay. Any other scheduling items?
Wyatt sent us a note over the weekend, I think, Friday, Saturday, about the staff report on the Insight application.
Yes.
Thank you for sending that. Celeste killed some trees at my request and printed paper copies because it's a really thick document. I just glanced at it. It says, at this time, no public meetings are scheduled for this project. Project schedule is pending discussions with the city manager on the specifics of the land sale negotiations. So all I'm asking here is just for some sense by maybe next Monday of what we tell the public about where we are on just scheduling consideration of it. Because as we all know, over the holidays, there was, community comment about the proposal. And the EDC would like your guidance as to, what we should do with it at the end of the month. We normally would meet on the 23rd. Is it something that's going to go straight to the full council, work session, planning commission, what's staff's recommendation?
Well, I think the normal way to proceed would be to have at least a term sheet that is agreed upon on how that land transaction would occur and what the terms would be before there's a deep engagement on the application itself. So that's what I'm working towards, to have that for the council's consideration.
Agreed.
So I think the big question we have is we have a couple local small businesses that are at this. So is that being thoroughly explored, how to protect them during the course of this?
So terms for not just the long-term parking, but also the interim parking during construction is a key term.
Okay. Is the Gateway special exception still on the calendar for, when was it, February? When do we expect to hear from them?
Gateway.
Falls Church Gateway Partners?
Yes.
Yeah, it's always been the plan to have a site plan submitted in the month of January. And we've heard no indication that that plan's changed.
Okay.
Wyatt, have we appropriately closed the loop with the AAB based on the request to comment on the design and aesthetics of the building?
Well, there were 2 responses to them from council members that I'm aware of that I think explained the situation to them very well. And so the concern that they had was that they weren't invited to that meeting with the Planning Commission and EDA. And the response to them was, A, that there was another town hall meeting in which all boards and commissions were explicitly invited, and 2, this is preliminary and the AAB is going to have a crucial role in their review of the project. So I'd be happy to reinforce that message, but I think they've gotten that message.
Yeah, I think I sent a response. I know Mary Beth, Dave, I know others spoke to them, and I think the message was actually fairly consistent, although done independently. But I personally did not see a response back with affirmation of, great, we look forward to reviewing it, or we'll be in touch, or anything like
Coming
that.
from AAB.
AAB, correct.
Yeah, I mean, they sent 2 emails sort of independently.
Right.
That I think we all got, and I think several or many of us sent replies independently, I think fairly consistent with each other.
There was no confirmation of.
But I have not heard back.
Okay.
One thing I'd suggest is we have a joint meeting coming up together
Yeah.
in some fashion or the other, and so that would be something that I think maybe you could work on the logistics of.
Or maybe you can ask the staff liaison to look in on that.
That's the new liaison, you can help facilitate that.
Their meeting's on the first Wednesday, right? So.
They don't meet all the time.
Now that you're passing it off.
Barry's for TJ.
I'd be happy to reach out to James White and, if there's something else that needs to be done.
You could ask him to
So that was
check
one thing
in
on,
as
we
well.
look at the calendar for the new year, that I liked how we used to do work sessions with our boards and commissions, if we could schedule that
Yeah, we could
rotating.
get back in the flow of that.
The other thing that we had done was our regional dinners, so whether we could get that on the calendar now that Arlington, Alexandria are settled, and then also we have new partners in Fairfax that we could.
We can do this.
Yeah, can we talk at the retreat, can we talk about that concept again, like a rotating, this month it's Penny Gross's turn, next month it's Dahlia Palchik's turn, next month it's John Faust, so that over the course of the year, we would have had a touch of some sort, even if it's just staff, but it'd be great if you could get them for lunch or whatever, with each of our neighboring, jurisdictions, just to talk about areas of mutual concern.
Good idea. Okay, anything else on scheduling?
We done?
I think so. We're done, guys?
All right, move to adjourn.
Thanks, council.